Good afternoon. Welcome to GSX 2024. I'm Doug Greenwald. I'm with the Convergent Digital Transformation team, and I'm here with Kyle Elliott, VP of Sales with RightCrowd. Thank you for joining me, Kyle.
Thank you.
So it's fitting that we're here in Orlando because spooky season is right around the corner, and just up the road is Halloween Horror Nights, which plays really well into what our topic today is going to be, and it's access chaos, the insidious threat to what's happening behind the scenes in the physical security industry. You know, as we talked about this topic a little bit, Kyle, insidious kind of comes across as ominous and maybe a little excessive when we apply it to physical security, but what are your thoughts around that?
Well, it's kind of a serious word, and maybe it's a little bit of an overshoot, but if you actually look at the definition of insidious, it's something that's being done repetitively in a subtle way that has a harmful effect. And so the word really is applicable when you think about how organizations are managing physical access today with a hybrid workforce, with a hybrid workplace. Lots more moving parts now happening in regards to physical access assignment, provisioning, and deprovisioning. So it's actually an appropriate word to use because most organizations are under a tremendous amount of risk that they're not even aware of in enforcing their security policies and then having a happy workforce as well.
Yeah, 100%. So where would be a good jumping off point then? When you think about the first and maybe, in my mind, most significant insidious threat?
I think there's one that kind of jumps out right away that's really obvious, which is doing things manually, right? Using people and going into actual systems that shouldn't be gone into, versus automating a process, a journey, a life cycle for the average worker to get access and go to the buildings. And so it doesn't really jump out and say, well, manual versus automated, but I'll give it a good example of why this makes so much sense. Look, our parents back in the old day, when they went on vacation with their families, they went to the paper atlas, they went to the map, and they mapped it out and they wrote it down. Well, then eventually there was stuff like MapQuest. Oh my gosh, you could do a starting and an ending and it would automate the journey for you. Well, what is it today? It's Google Maps, it's Waze, right? We use our phone, it's updated continuously, there's information that's coming to us, making recommendations, simple, easy, automated, right? Physical access should be done that way as well. Don't touch your authoritative data sources, your Workday, your HR, your IT systems. Don't touch your PAC system because we don't want dirty data there where we have replications and other things. Use a piece of smart, intelligent, AI-enabled software that manages that entire life cycle from hire to retire.
Yeah, it's a perfect example, right? How many things are automated nowadays, right? So your example of being able to be rerouted, through MapQuest, for example. Well, if there's an incident that occurs on your route, it's going to send you a different direction.
That's right.
And so when we think about physical security, how many times do you maybe have a new hire that has access rights that should be a little bit more higher based on their role within the organization?
That's right.
Well, you want that to get rerouted to the right person to approve it without having to send a whole bunch of tickets or know natively that the person that's entering that information is going to make the right decision based on that user.
Doug, you'd be shocked. Some organizations are still sending emails for request of change access, or I need to update my photo for my badge, or any number of different examples. And you brought to light as a very good example why automation makes so much sense today, is that we're still in kind of a hybrid workplace environment. I might be working part-time from home and then part-time from the office. Well, no one has a permanent desk anymore. So requesting access will define what access is provisioned based on where I'm gonna have a desk for the day or if I need to use a conference room. And so again, smart software, automating that process for performance, for reliability, for better safety policy enforcement really makes a difference.
So maybe that leads me into thinking about the next kind of insidious threat to our industry, right? If we've got all this manual process, what happens when you have multiple disparate systems, right? So I'm a large global organization, I've grown through acquisition, I've got multiple PAC systems, so physical access control. They're all running different versions. They all have different credentials. They all have different readers in place, right? How do I go about this unification process so that I can automate now across those disparities?
Yeah, and it is insidious because it's something that most organizations live with each day, which is the lack of data integration between authoritative data sources like your HR system, your IT system, maybe you have an external contractor system for managing contractors and vendors, and then all those physical access control systems, you could have one if you're lucky and you're standardized, or like many large organizations through mergers and acquisitions, they have multiple PAC systems. So the real opportunity here is to bridge that divide and utilize data from all these disconnected systems more effectively and more efficiently. And modern physical identity access management solutions like provided by RightCrowd integrates all of those systems together so that you get more value, you get more timely information, processing and workflows are networked more effectively, and there's now an integration between the physical and the logical side, right? IT's been doing this successfully for a long time. How do we integrate our systems so that we get better knowledge, better intelligence, better decision making? Physical security is just catching up, but the opportunity is almost immediate and really beneficial.
Absolutely. Well, so now that we've kind of figured out, all right, we're going to automate a lot of these processes of how we, onboard and offboard employees in these organizations, even contractors, visitors, right? Now we've brought together those disparate systems. What could the next insidious threat underlying be with regards to how do we make sense of that data?
Yeah, no, great question. The other big threat is when you bring those systems together, you now have a very clear visual path to what your most significant risks are, where your danger points are, what's going to impact your user community, your worker community. And the thing that jumps out to me, Doug, is reporting and analytics, which on the face of it would say, well, yeah, I already get reports out of my Linnell system or my Secure system or whatever it might be. But those are generic sort of badge swipe data. What we really want to know is, am I in compliance of my enforcement of my policies? Many organizations are regulatory watched over, right? So I need to be able to provide daily, weekly, monthly physical access audit reports and information that says, yes, we are following our policy. Yes, only the right people with the right level of clearance have access to that particular space, and I can prove it, right? So when you think about analytics and reporting, think of it more in regards to compliance, right, and regulatory control. These are very expensive problems for organizations. It can even shutter portions of your business, right? If you think about utility industry and NERC CIP compliance, every day that you're out of that particular protocol costs you $1 million in fines. Let's say we're not monitoring, physical access provisioning and you have a bad character into your organization. The average cyber attack actually comes from within the organization and costs an average of $4.4 million. So these are very worrisome problems that are very fixable.
100%. I mean, you bring up a great point, right? It's not just about, the automation of those processes, but how are we mitigating long-term risk that you don't even realize is bubbling up under the surface, right? It goes back to the entire concept of the conversation, which is controlling that chaos that if you're doing things manually, if you've got multiple disparate systems that you're trying to manage and mitigate the way people are entering information or managing that information, and then to bring it all together with your different business units having to reach for compliance, meet auditing requirements, or even take that data and do something meaningful like drive insider risk analytics to understand, hey, how are my users behaving within my organization?
100%, and that's where it all comes together, Doug, right?
Yeah.
First we solve the problem with let's not do things manually because it's error prone, it's got lots of mistakes, it's just the wrong way to do it. Then we integrated those systems together so we get the power of unification, right? Now we have the reporting and the capability to be able to monitor what's happening so that we can proactively look at significant threats as it relates to the workforce and their use of the different facilities. And it's modern, it's here, it's available, right? Yep. We've worked in partnership with Convergent for years and done a number of these very successful types of projects. The last thing I would kind of say just on that particular topic is also looking at what's the power to the end user. The average worker doesn't know anything about physical access or policy enforcement. They just want to know that their badge works, right? Or they've got a mobile credential on their phone. It works. They present it to the door, it opens, right? They're able to get their work done. And again, with today's modern workplace where no one has a guaranteed spot, you're always hoteling and desking, the quality of performance, quality of experience is really important, right? A lot of organizations now are almost mandating come back 5 days a week. We want that experience to be amazing. We want that physical access to be simplified. We want seamless and frictionless types of experiences for these workers, even if they're completely unaware of what kind of policy enforcement is happening behind them.
Yeah, and you touch on, process is critical to understanding, the fit for these types of solutions. And one thing I think that we've been challenged a little bit in the physical security industry with is we're always concerned about widgets. What's the latest camera? What kind of technology can that reader, read? It misses out on the basic question of how does this technology get used within our organization? What are the processes and workflows tied to it? And how, at the end of the day, are we mitigating as much risk as possible while reducing the human intervention to do very basic things that, to your point, logical access, IT has been doing for years now in an automated and very real way. So with that, if you've got an interest in learning more about these types of solutions, Kyle and you can click the link in our LinkedIn profile and you can send us a message. Certainly reach out to us via your account executive if you're an existing Convergent employee. But ultimately, our goal through our experiences is to help define what are the outcomes you hope to achieve based on your use cases and some of the things that we've raised. What is the insidious threat to your organization? If we can help you identify that, then we have the solution in RightCrowd to be able to solve for it. So with that, Kyle, it's always a pleasure, man.
Thank you, Doug.